Hi team, welcome back to our Introduction to Chinese History Anchor Fact series of printables and mini lessons. What do you do when your kingdom has failed? When its leader cannot protect you from foreign invaders and drug dealers? You change leaders. It's strange because Americans have felt this way recently. During the presidency of Joe Biden, many people were allowed into the United States in a way that was technically illegal, and many drugs flowed into the United States the same way, through the same border. Americans have a way of fixing a problem like this. They simply vote for somebody who will do things differently. Of course, Donald Trump is the person I am referring to. And it is clear he wants to control the border and stop the drugs from being brought into America illegally. Sound familiar? That's exactly what China wanted to do in the Opium Wars and after. Were not successful. They couldn't do the job. The problem for the Chinese was that they had no right to vote. They could only change their leaders by one way: rebelling. So they did. But they had done this before. They had rebelled against the Xia dynasty to bring about the Shang dynasty. They had rebelled against the Shang dynasty to bring about the Zhou dynasty. They had rebelled against the Zhou dynasty to bring about the Qin dynasty. They had rebelled against the Qin dynasty to bring about the Han dynasty. Well, you get the picture. Rebellions are one thing. China had many of those, but nothing changed, because all they were doing was replacing one set of leaders with another set, within the same system. The difference between a rebellion and a revolution is that in a revolution, you don't just change leaders, you change forms of government. Like the American Revolution, where the American colonies went from having a monarchy to having a republic. In 1911, there was an uprising against the emperor. Would it be a rebellion or a revolution? First, let's start with the question, why 1911? The story is told in a Hollywood movie called The Last Emperor. The Quanzhou emperor had died without an heir, which means he did not have a son who could take over. This put the Empress Dowager, Cixi, in charge. An Empress Dowager, by the way, is the widow of a dead emperor. She chose to put the emperor's nephew named Pu Yi onto the throne. The problem was, he was 2 years old. Obviously, he could not actually be emperor. These are the kinds of situations where monarchies fail. Kings have to be strong to rule. Children cannot do it. Another good example is the story of King Tut, the boy king of ancient Egypt. As we know, he died young, and possibly because he was attacked. When even the army rebelled against the emperor in 1911, it became clear that the country would need a new leader. The boy emperor was removed from the throne, and the last Chinese dynasty came to an end. The general, Yuan Shikai, was put in charge of the government and hoped to become a new emperor himself. That would only have been a rebellion, of course. At first, he was resisted by rebels who were led by Sun Yat-sen, an American-trained doctor who hoped to make China into a republic like the United States. If Sun Yat-sen had won, that would have been a revolution. Unfortunately, both men died of natural causes in the years to come, and neither of their plans succeeded. So China was left leaderless. The century of humiliation would continue. So, is the Chinese Revolution of 1911 really a revolution? What it produced was anarchy, which means no government. But when you look at what came next, you can see why it is referred to as a revolution. The Chinese Revolution of 1911 was the first step in overthrowing monarchy and bringing about communism. That is a revolution. It would just have a few steps over a few decades before it came to fruition. Next time, we'll look at the climax of the story of the century of humiliation and how China finally began to change into the modern country that it is today.